they can see us?
Not yet. I don't know. I mean, there's that bit of a lag, so
Yep, I think so. They should be able to
yeah,
see us in a
yeah. I
second.
think we're good now. Yeah.
Hey everyone, welcome to
Hey.
week 22 of the G5A Virtual Cinema Club, where every week we discuss two works by a filmmaker, you know, um, from a range of countries exploring world cinema. We've been in Asia, and we are entering our first week of looking at filmmakers from India, specifically focusing on contemporary filmmakers in India. My name is Neeraj. I'm a
Yeah, yeah.
cinematographer from
I'm
LA.
Ishan. I work at G5A.
And yeah, and so today's filmmaker is Anand Gandhi. Um, he's directed Ship of Theseus, and the other film we are looking at is Tumbbad, which he creative directed. And yeah, and so we're gonna just kind of dive right into it, right? Jean, everything good so far? No,
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
Audio wise and everything, we're not having any issues, right?
I think we're good so
Okay,
far. I
sounds
think we're
good.
good.
So
Um,
yeah, I
but
guess
yeah,
we can start by talking about Ship of Theseus really quickly. So just to kind of situate you guys
yeah. I
who
mean,
have.
I don't know if you mentioned it. I don't know if you mentioned it. Also, you're lagging a bit for me, um, but yeah. So I mean, we might we're gonna have a special guest
Yeah.
uh on in a bit. That we're really excited to sort of chat and take this the sort of cinema club sessions like that sort of step forward. So that, I mean, that's something that we're really excited about, and hopefully we'll I think it'll work out today, and then we'll get more people on in the forthcoming weeks,
Mm-hmm.
specifically while we're focusing on contemporary Indian films. Um, and yeah, so that's really exciting. And if anyone has any specific questions, um, you know, please feel free to send them in the Telegram group or on the YouTube chat.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Absolutely.
we can incorporate them in our discussion and conversation with our guests. But so what we'll do this time is sort of just give like a brief overview of the two films. And then we'll have our guest on.
Yeah, exactly. So just to start with, Ship of Theseus. Um, as a film, it kind of has these. I guess you could say it has like three smaller vignettes that kind of tie together by the end of the
Yeah.
film, and you kind of understand
Yeah.
kind of the larger themes that Anand Gandhi is trying to direct or like discuss and look into and delve into. So Ship of Theseus. I mean, basically, it's a philosophical concept or question, I guess, where if every single plank of a ship is replaced by the end of it, is it still the same ship or is it a completely new ship, right? And that's the question, I
Yeah.
guess, the
Yeah. So
philosophical
basically, I mean,
question.
basically, like, are we like if sort of converting that to like a human, in human terms, I guess it's like it begs the question: are we the same if all of our parts are different,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, and I think, I mean, that starts off really clearly with, I think, and the first story is about a photographer who's had an eye injury, like I think very early on,
Mm-hmm.
and basically has taken photographs without really seeing. And so there's we go into this whole like wonderful process of how she sees her photographs when
Through
um
sound,
even
really.
despite being visually, yeah,
Yeah,
sound, but also like they do the print and then she
yeah,
feels them.
exactly.
um and then also, and then obviously the how does she grapple, like she has the surgery and has her corneas replaced, and then how does she grapple with this new way of seeing almost, right, which is
Mm-hmm.
something that we'll get into when we discuss the film more. And then do you wanna explain the second two
Yeah, I mean,
vignettes here?
yeah. So then the second vignette in the film is about this basically this Jain monk, um, and the film and that vignette starts with him kind of having this moral question, but also this moral fight, right, about animal testing for pharmaceuticals, and kind of the abuse that animals go through, and he's fighting for this cause. And basically, what's very fascinating is there's this the question that he's posing is kind of turned on himself, right? It ends up being a question that he has to
Yeah.
grapple. He's forced to grapple with himself because he's diagnosed with a liver disease essentially, and
Cirrhosis.
cirrhosis,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And he is forced to make this. Is he going to stand his ground, or is he going to have to take these medicines and kind of
Yeah. Because I mean, it's a life or death situation,
exactly,
right? Like if he
exactly.
doesn't take, like, it's like the medicines will likely cure him because it seems like a curable infection.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, if he doesn't take those, then that's it, right?
Yeah.
And that's sort of what we end up seeing a
Yeah,
bit.
exactly. So there's that, and then there's the third um, story where it's about this man who basically starts off by
Like
going
a
through.
stockbroker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's like a stockbroker, and he starts off by going through a kidney transplant himself, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Yeah, which is kind of nice. You don't really know. Like he's just leaving the hospital.
yeah, he's just leaving the hospital, and you kind of discover that as you go, and he comes
Yeah.
across essentially he questions, I guess, this where he got his kidney from, and he comes across this man, um, Shankar, right? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Shankar,
Yeah.
who he finds out is basically.
All right. I think we have the guess. Sorry, I don't know
Oh,
if you can.
okay. We
I'm
can
just gonna let
we
him.
can just kind of speed through it, I
Yeah.
guess.
You can just, yeah.
So, um,
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
hi
Hi.
Anand.
Hi.
Hey guys. How's it going?
Good. How's it
Hi.
going?
I'm
Welcome.
I'm Ishan. Lovely to meet you.
I'm Neeraj.
Ishan,
Thank you so
hi.
much for joining
Hey,
us.
Neeraj. Good to
Um,
see you guys.
Yeah. So we were just kind of discussing actually the third story in Ship of Theseus and kind of just explaining it to some of our viewers. So the third kind of story, it basically is this man's journey kind of grappling with the kind of the ethics of, organ transplants. And he's forced to go abroad and kind of confront this, this person who has received an organ. And by the end of the film, all of this kind of ties together when you see um, these three characters we've
That
seen in these
movie.
three vignettes,
Yeah.
but then these other characters who have come together to see this very uh interesting I guess it's like a screening of sorts, but it's just this man, and you just see his shadow on these walls in a cave, and it's a very fitting end for this film, I think, because it's tying all of it together, but also at the same time, I think, uh, kind of it gives the audience this moment to breathe, I think, in a way, and start thinking about the whole film that they've seen. And from a
Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah, um,
Uh, sorry. So I mean, just I guess just we can
yeah,
just to orient you. Um, so
Yeah.
we were just doing a short like brief of the two films,
hmm
and then just getting into the conversation. Um, and yeah, so I guess it's perfect timing uh, that when you joined us.
yeah,
Um, so I mean, I think maybe what we can do is since Anand is here, just like start talking about that, and then we can talk about Tumbbad afterwards, or like go
yeah,
into that
yeah.
if
I
that
think that's
works for you
perfect.
guys.
Yeah, that's great.
So has the audience just seen the films?
Yeah.
Have they just
So
have you
basically,
screened them?
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So we basically,
Neeraj, do you just want to explain the format? Sorry,
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
lagging a bit for me, so I'm
No
gonna try
worries.
and just like fix some internet.
So basically, Anand, what happens is every, at the beginning of every 2 weeks, we essentially say these are the two films that are like the homework of sorts, or the viewing, and then every other weekend on Sunday mornings, we kind of Ishan and I get together and we start discussing kind of, you know, in depth, kind of how the the thematic side of the films, but also kind of how the craft tells the story and how it better explains these films. And oftentimes the audience will have questions that they'll send in live through the YouTube
Yeah,
link
yeah.
that we have, and so we kind of will incorporate those questions or answer those questions to the best we can. And we're really excited to have you on board. Kind of, this is our first actual session where we've had the filmmaker himself or herself to like actually speak about the films, because it's you can only speculate to what the intention might have been, but now it's something amazing, because now we can just kind of really just ask you what you had in mind when you made some of these decisions and choices.
Sounds great. Which part of the world are you guys in?
Ishan, are you frozen? Are you good? So Ishan is in Mumbai, and
I just
I'm in Los Angeles, Anand. Yeah. So we've been kind of doing this. This is our 22nd session.
Oh wow.
Yeah, we kind of started at the beginning of
Oh,
the quarantine, and we've just been kind of, it's been a fun viewing of films. Very very incredible learning experience, honestly. Um, and I'd seen Ship of Theseus a few years back, when it, like many years back, I guess, when it came out. Now it's been 7-8 years, and then just having rewatched it now, I think after I myself am a cinematographer, and so like having kind of been working for a few years, I think I saw it in a very different light now than I did back then, at the start of my career, so to speak. And so just to kind of get into it, I think
sorry. I think I'm back. I
yes,
can
you
see
are.
you guys moving. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I could hear you, but I like, you were doing a good job of it,
Yeah,
explaining. So I didn't want to like interrupt
no
and
worries.
not really be coherent. All right, cool.
So just to get into it, I think what I like learned from seeing Ship of Theseus and also Tumbbad, I think your films kind of start with this like philosophical question, so to speak. And I'm just curious, because like how do you kind of arrive at maybe what that question might be, or what you're looking to explore in a film? Because I think both films do that at a very not at a different level, but to a like to a deeper level. And I think that would be something we like. I'd be very curious to know a little bit about from you.
the the attempt always is to make the abstract visceral. The idea, of course, is to use the medium to look at questions that are yet unresolved by science, and
Mm,
I focus very clearly on questions that are yet to be resolved by science, um, and yet to be resolved by our current understanding of policy,
Mm-hmm.
and of future of humanity, um, as 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 a centerpiece of my own inquiry,
Mm-hmm.
and then start lacing around it frameworks that we have at our disposal from science, but we don't necessarily know of yet. Like in both Shape and Tumbbad, I've used the human relationship with the microbiome as a layered framework, where the idea of a zombie state. In fact, I met producers who advise the CDC towards investments in zombie films as as a way of precautioning audiences against, and making a large number of audiences aware about potential risks of a pandemic
right, right.
as a
Very
as a
apt.
means to
Yeah. I mean,
gathering.
I've seen like a lot of people just out of the blue saying like, "Oh, I watched Contagion," or "Oh, I watched this film right now," and I'm very surprised, because it sort of seems like the film that you would definitely stay away from, in the current context. But it seems like
Yeah.
it's kind of like a weird, like almost perverse intrigue or
Mm-hmm.
interest, that
Yeah,
um, people have.
like Train to Busan, for
Well, it's
example.
not perverse at all. It's in fact the reason why curiosity evolved in the first place. We are curious
Mm,
so that we can save our lives, basically.
right, right. No,
Mm-hmm.
that's true. That's true.
The fundamental evolutionary function of inquiry, of curiosity, is to gather tools, resources, insights, wisdom that will help you sustain life,
Right.
and sustain life on this planet at
Mm-hmm.
scale. So that's really the fundamental purpose of all inquiry and
Mm-hmm.
all storytelling for by that extension.
Right.
The reason we tell each other stories is so that we can package our insights into neat metaphors, into neat visceral experiences that we we have evolved to remember,
Mm-hmm.
so that we don't
Yeah.
necessarily uh, we have various kinds of coding systems, and some coding
Mm.
systems are require more training than others, and
Right.
the most advanced coding systems that we have at our disposal, which are mathematical equations, scientific frameworks. These are coding systems that take a lot of training of the mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You need to learn these systems over years and years and years. And the coding system that requires absolutely very little training are stories,
Yeah.
are
Absolutely.
intuitions, emotions, behaviors that we have that we have evolved over millions of years for very very specific purposes.
Mm-hmm.
So what I really try to focus on doing is take insights that have been coded or that have been understood by sciences and have been coded in the very sophisticated and extremely rich and complex language
Mm-hmm.
of scientific frameworks, of scientific insight and mathematical insights, and try to convert them to visceral narratives, to
Right. Right.
to emotions, to behaviors, to experiences that are far more easy to reach, far more
Mm-hmm.
accessible, because they are not they're not requisite of um, of knowledge of the coding system.
Right. 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 Right.
So
I,
that's
I guess
that.
I'm.
Sorry, yeah.
No, please, no, please continue.
So that's the storytelling craft, and
Mm.
the central question is always, like I said. So that's the third layer. So the first layer is, of course, the central question. The central layer is the central question. Um, there isn't always one question. There is one large question that I'm investigating into over the years.
It's kind of
So
Right.
like your thesis statement in a way.
yeah, exactly. And every film is a thesis, right? Every
Right.
I mean, I look back at every piece of work that I've produced or directed or worked with, and I think of that as my thesis. I do not. I The approach has always been that of making a thesis, and that's why
Mm-hmm.
it's taken
Right.
good 3 or 4 years to make each one of these.
Right.
Um, and the central question is a large approach to a framework about uh, understanding human behavior, why it exists, uh, understanding human identity, where the human ends and the environment begins, what compels the human individual to behave in the way they do, and what is extremely beneficial for sustenance, for well-being of the human, what is at the detriment of the human individual and the human collective. These are questions that we have
Mm-hmm.
asked ourselves as children. I mean, not probably phrased them this way. As children, we ask the same questions. We ask questions like, "Who am I? Where do I come from? Is the world real? Is the universe real? Am I real?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any meaning to any of this, or is this just completely meaningless?" We ask these questions as young people, as children, and what I'm doing is essentially asking the same questions over and over again, just rephrasing them constantly, and rephrasing them in the light of everything that I learn, everything that I gather,
Yeah.
all the
So, just a quick question. Like, I'm just curious, what drove you to what that question may have been for Ship of Theseus, for example? Was there an event? Was there, is there something that was the seed of what took you to what would eventually become Ship of Theseus?
well, it's a hybrid seed, really. In the metaphor of seed, I think uh, it's a hybrid seed made from uh, many generations of thought trees, and their interactions and seeds that come off them. So it of course is made up of many things, from early childhood to late 20s, from my own personal inquiry with that was incessant through my childhood,
Mm-hmm.
of trying and making sense of this world, this place that I
Mm.
found myself in, this consciousness that has awakened, that is self-aware. I'm able to look around the world, and I'm looking at myself. And as a child, I'm looking at this experience, and trying to make sense of it, trying to understand why it exists and how it came about, and what can I possibly do with it. So
Mm-hmm.
these questions are incessant, and my inquiry was
Mm-hmm.
incessant because of that. So questions came from there. The fundamental questions, of course, arose from there. Then then there are smaller questions, which which you which open up like an onion. The more you open them, the more they unravel.
Mm.
It seem to be simple, but actually are the most sophisticated questions of human life. So questions like the ones that the monk is asking, that is there, um, can you accept your predatorial role in the society, in the
Ecosystem,
the
or
ecosystem, the
yeah,
ecosphere? Yeah. Is it all right for humans to accept our predatorial position in this ecosphere, or
yeah,
is it worth aspiring to a non-predatory
mm,
future
yeah.
of this
Or
ecosystem?
like, is it our responsibility, given our awareness of
Yeah,
where we stand, or that we're sort of in that sense a new kind of like apex predator? Is it our responsibility not to just continue that
Yeah.
tradition, or that
absolutely, absolutely,
expectation?
absolutely. Yeah, so that's so well put, Ishan. That's absolutely right. That is it our responsibility, and is it a worthy aspiration
Mm,
to imagine a non-predatory ecosphere, and our role being
yeah,
non-predatory?
Yeah.
So that's a question that I was asking, and that's a question I've
right.
been asking all my life, and
Mm-hmm.
hence it was an important micro question within that larger macro question of
Yeah,
identity.
Mm-hmm.
And but the micro question, of course, opens up to the macro question, which is, if there is indeed no meaning, and if all meaning has to be anthropocentric, then why bother?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Then
right.
where do you really draw that line, because you're drawing lines in sand. So
Yeah.
so that micro question became more and more important, and was sufficiently important for me to kind of invoke that question in the larger questioning about identity and death.
Absolutely.
um, and likewise with all the smaller questions that are being asked there,
Yeah, I
the idea
think
of,
there was this one, like, very, I mean, first of all, it's visually striking, but there's this one moment in the film where you see these feet walking and you see this little worm or caterpillar basically, inching
Yeah,
across
yeah,
the
yeah,
screen. He picks it up and he places it, and then, it immediately cuts to that question in the film. And I think
yeah. But also it sort of like reminds you. I think it's in Alia's story, right, where she's talking about the caterpillar having a conversation. I'm forgetting with which animal right now, but who says that how
of
can you
normal.
walk with, yeah, how can you walk with 100 feet so in sync? And I think it sort of brings up that interesting question of like doing it without realizing, and then once you sort of start focusing on it,
mm-hmm,
it's sort of like I guess it like falls apart because you're focusing so much, then you're
mm-hmm.
like, oh, how am I doing this?
And
And then cutting to that, to Maitreya picking up
mm-hmm,
the thing, is sort of just like continues the, I think, um I guess just keeps you with the whole story, despite it being like
mm-hmm,
three distinct you know mini narratives
yeah,
almost.
I think I learned to do that more and more increasingly. Like I with Tumbad was also three distinct stories,
yeah,
but
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
we managed to effectively blend the three stories together.
mm-hmm,
And the one I'm writing right now, Wildebeest, is also three chapters, and
mm-hmm,
I think I'm learning to create sufficient um, intricacies between, and
mm,
sufficient relationships between the chapters increasingly, as
mm-hmm,
I mean,
right,
I think I'm going to keep doing that, because when I set out to tell a story, there is just so much I want to share. There are years of insights that I've gathered up, that I've accumulated, that I want to
Yeah.
share at one go. And I'm always, every time I set out to direct, I imagine this is the last time I'm going to direct a film. So
Okay.
this is probably my last op. I mean, life is fragile. So much can happen.
Yeah.
Sure, sure.
So I set out with that notion that okay, this is probably the last time I'm going to get to say what I want to say. So I keep that in mind. I go out with that vantage point, with that
Mhm.
uh, possibility,
Yeah.
saying and try to shove a bit too much in it,
Yeah.
perhaps.
I also think
But that also means that parts have to interact and create a whole that is
Yeah, yeah,
greater than the sum of the parts.
yeah.
Hence,
absolutely.
No, I think
I mean, I guess
also
that's just
oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead, Neeraj.
No, I think what I really loved about, this story with Maitreya was especially like his relationship to the characters around him, right? And I think it's
yeah,
it's funny because I think what I was going to say was I think what ends up happening is that he asks these questions, but he does it in a way that doesn't come off like I know more than you or I'm better than you. It
Preachy.
has a
Yeah, yeah,
very like
yeah,
witty comedic moment to it, and something that could have been very like kind of serious turns into
yeah,
like he treats it with such lightheartedness, and I think as a director and the way you've written it as well, you've done that, which I mean goes to credit to like um, kind of alleviating some of the heavier hitting parts of that
yeah,
sequence,
yeah,
and it just really kind of it gives it a certain pacing and energy, and you kind of move through it in a way that
yeah,
it's very it's always it's a pleasure to see, especially with that. I mean, Neeraj Kabi, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Neeraj is
and
amazing.
just an incredible
What a
actor,
what a
and
what a wonderful actor.
yeah, and also I think I mean I was going to get to this later on, but I just wanted to like also kind of just eventually talk about your collaboration with Soham Shah as in in Ship of Theseus and also in Tumbbad, both films. I think,
Yeah.
and I mean it seems like a lot of your core team as well, like Pankaj Kumar and like as a cinematographer, kind of just working with people you've worked with in the past and like
Yeah.
just anything. I mean I don't know if you have any like anything to like speak about that, or just are they a part of your like creation process from the beginning? Kind of where do they come in?
Well, Pankaj, surely, Pankaj, of course, was always a part of the thought process, the early thinking process. He comes from he comes from a slightly different space than me when it comes to approaching a philosophical question.
Hmm.
His uh, his journey with philosophy is more visceral, is not necessarily as uh, intellectually complex or scientifically complex as mine would be. So he comes from a more intuitive space of looking at any of these questions.
Hmm.
And but he brings one is he pokes at the questions that I'm asking. He pokes at the knowledge that I take for granted, right? Because a lot of times I I come down from the mountains and I assume that the world has heard the same voice that I have, and I just
yeah, yeah.
start saying it, and I need people around me to poke at it and to tell me that this makes no sense. What you're jumping the gun here,
Yeah.
which Pankaj does from time to time, and he would always come back and say, but why they weren't saying these things? Why they weren't behaving like this? Like
So it's like a little
during
reality
Tumbbad,
check.
yeah, during Tumbbad and Shift, like Pankaj would singularly be the biggest point of argument for me. You would be like, just this makes no sense. Who talks like this? And I'm like, Pankaj, all my friends and I talk like this. Like, and he's seen that. He's been a friend. He's been a very close friend since our early 20s,
Oh wow.
and he's seen me talk to my other friends. That's Khushbu and
Mm,
Vinay and Chaitanya and Zain and all these guys. Seen Zain, of course, came later, but the others, Pooja and others, Pankaj, have seen all the people who are now directing projects at Nemesis. Uh, and we do talk like that. We
Hmm.
do talk like our characters talk in our films. Uh, in fact, that's all we do. We never.
mm,
There is really at Nemesis never small talk. Like
Hmm.
absolutely never. There is never any small talk.
it's just the big questions.
It's just it because that's how we live. I mean, this is life for us. This is every moment of our life. It's not
Mm,
it's not something that we it's not
put
only
on
a
for the
definition of
film.
life. It's truly a snapshot of how my friends live and
Right.
how people I admire live.
It's not a singular
So
point. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
so hence also a lot of times I'm just documenting that.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And uh,
Do you ever record these conversations to kind of go back to and like, if you have to like reference something?
we just started recording some conversations recently because we felt that it's probably valuable to keep a record.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
came from this very joke with where so many people suspect that nobody talks like this when they watch our films, and I go like, okay, let me just keep a record of some of our conversations just to put them out in defense, not in
Hmm.
defense of
Yeah.
our
Hmm.
didactic work sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, Pankaj brings that value into the project.
Yeah.
Soham brought in the money at an early stage. That was really valuable.
Hmm.
He backed Ship of Theseus at a time when it was really necessary
Mm.
uh, and important to find the right kind of backing for the project to have that independence.
Hmm.
Um, and people that are not spoken of are actually as often in our teams are have really been long-term backbones of all these projects, and their visions have guided, their ideas have guided
Mm.
these projects very deeply. So, for example, Pooja, who's the head of design on Tumbbad and Ship of Theseus both,
Like a
uh,
production designer, or
she's well
when you say head
on
of
Tumbbad
design?
she was the head of all design, so she was
Okay.
kind of the design visionary in a way.
Okay.
There was Nitin used to first work with Pooja and like kind of report to Pooja in a way, and then he kind of became the production designer on
Okay.
the project.
Okay.
So,
Nice.
so Nitin, so mm, there is very rapid movement at our studio usually, where
Hmm.
if we find somebody has the potential to contribute meaningful
Right.
to the
Right.
project, they go from being an intern to being an HOD in a couple of months. So
Wow.
that's Nitin's story as well. Nitin was an intern who turned a design assistant who immediately became a production designer on Tumbbad, on a film like Tumbbad that way.
Nice.
Incredible.
So, but Pooja is really and Pooja has just directed a show that we have produced. So that's coming out in November
Oh wow,
on Disney.
Oh wow.
congrats.
Pooja and
Congrats.
Neil have co-directed the show.
Nice.
They're both brilliant. So Neil was my assistant on Tumbar, but he was also the crowd director. So all the big crowd scenes, he would write 200 different scripts for 200. So if you look
Wow.
closely, you'd see that none of the secondary, tertiary cast are just moving about as if they've been told
Mm.
to
Just
the
to do
instruction. The
something.
instruction is
Yeah.
clearly not okay. Group A go from left to right. Okay,
Yeah.
group
Yeah.
B.
Yeah.
It's not that. You can see that all of them are moving about very
Yeah.
meaningfully in
They
the
have their
larger scale.
backstories and they're kind of
Yeah.
they're
Yeah,
really being
because
directed
Neil
as
wrote
much.
like 200 like 300 scripts almost for the market scene, where every
Wow.
extra was handed a small script
Hmm.
of their
Right. I
acting.
mean, yeah. I mean, I guess that must be like a great thing because they actually like have to do something that
Yeah.
feels mean even if it's
So when you look
like
at
it
the
feels
large,
real.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. When you look at the wide shot, you can see that it's a real place. It doesn't for a
Yeah.
second look like it's made up.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think what's I mean that this is sort of something that we've been discussing over the weeks, right? I mean, it's great to hear this because it's one of those things that when you like when it works, with so much intention and thought, people don't see it, and that's in some way
It's
exactly what you
subconscious.
want. Yeah, and then
Absolutely.
but obviously when it like doesn't work so well or stands out is really when
Absolutely.
people notice it, and that's what you don't want.
Hmm.
But I
Absolutely.
think that's something that we've seen in so many of the films is that that we've watched is so much detail goes into things that either are intentionally subconscious or seemingly like insignificant. I mean, you don't want to say that it's not relevant, but it's just sort of something that you would miss.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But it adds so much to just the general like atmosphere and world of your experience.
Hmm.
um
Absolutely. Because the believability of the world as a tool is a very
yeah,
powerful tool. There are
absolutely.
ways of kind of transcending even that tool. And there are great
Mm.
directors who have done that and done
Mhm.
that extremely effectively. Uh, Dogville, for example, Lars von
Mhm.
Trier, you know,
Mm-hmm.
uh, builds the world by drawing lines on a floor, drawing
Mhm.
literally lines on the studio floor, and tells us to start imagining the the world there, the
Yeah.
entire city there,
Yeah.
and he keeps it that way through 3 hours. And 20 minutes, 30 minutes into the film, the lines, we stopped looking at the lines, we stopped looking at the studio floor, we are actually seeing a city.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so there are people who have done that effectively as well, extremely effectively as well.
Mhm.
Um, I've so far not done that. I've so far been using believability as a tool, realism as a tool to kind of pres- to look at what could also be as parallel
Right.
reality. I've
Yeah,
created
yeah.
parallel realities by using the tools of realism.
Mhm. I think so. I know Ishan has pulled some stills from Ship of Theseus, and we can
Yeah.
go into that. But as Ishan is pulling that up, what I just wanted to like kind of briefly touch upon was what I thought was fascinating in the first story of Ship of Theseus with the photographer, right? Is how she can't see, but I think what happens is when you maybe lose one of your senses, I think your other senses become hyper sensitive, or and so I think what you did very well, and very, like, I don't know if it was like who exactly the person it was that you worked with, but the sound design with the auditory kind of part of that first chapter was incredibly it was kind of pushed for the audience as well, so you're actually hearing a lot of the stuff she's listening to, and I think you start to feel it a little more.
That's right. The sound designer on the project was Gabor Erdei. Gabor also did a part of Tumbbad.
Okay.
Then and Gabor has been doing a lot of our projects. He does our smaller films as well. So Gabor has been a discovery for life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I saw a film many years ago that did not resonate with me very much, and I did not agree with the idea of the film or the worldview of the film or even the story was not believable. So I can say I disliked the film a lot, and a couple of years later when I was thinking about sound for my film, I I remember this film so well, and and I thought if a film that I disliked and that did not resonate with me had sound that was so powerful, that was so that has stayed with me after all these years, to
Right.
the point that the sound I could recall the sound of the entire film. I could recall the entire film scene after scene just because of the sound design.
Mm.
That was how powerful the sound design was. So I looked at the sound designer on that film. I didn't investigate any further. I found his name. I tried to look him up. Found him on social media. Reached out to him. This is during Ship of Theseus early post. I'm talking about 2011, 2010 right now.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I reached out to him, and he said, "Well, yeah. Why don't you send me the material? Let me look at it." I sent him the material. He messaged me, I think, the next day saying, "This is really the most powerful material I've seen in many years of my life. Can it'd be a privilege to work on it. Let's kind of start thinking about it. I want to understand deep. I really
Mm.
want to dive with you." And then I looked him up on IMDb, and it turned out that he was Bellatar's sound designer.
Who's, say that
And
again, I missed the voice.
Tar Bella,
Okay.
Bellatar.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
uh, that's so Neeraj, if that's the problem with being in Los Angeles, while you get to access some of the greatest stuff that's happening in that part of the world, you miss out on everything else that's happening in the rest of the world.
So I
Bellatar
mean
is
that's actually one, a great learning that we've had over these weeks is that because we started from the east, we've just been exposed to so many wonderful, like, just a different way of looking at cinema and
Hmm.
and storytelling specifically, and I think that's
Yeah.
been
That was the
in
focus of
many
this.
ways, I mean, that was sort of what we, almost selfishly wanted to, what is the best, I think early in the lockdown, we were like, what is the best way to sort of be productive? And we were like, let's find a system that we can just watch films,
That's
Mm-hmm.
and
great. So
ones that we might not watch.
you guys have a great directory to discover, because I'm assuming that you haven't seen Bellatar the way.
Not extensively, no.
So
But
you
I'm just
okay? So you have to discover Bellatar. He's easily one of the greatest filmmakers of the century.
Oh wow.
He's probably he's one of the few, like I would say, about, like there are the 6 or 7 filmmakers I would call the greatest filmmakers of all time who
oh
are
wow.
alive, and Bellatar is one of them.
Okay, great. We'll definitely like look him up and then add him to our list of
So
filmmakers.
when we're in that part of Europe, I think we'll definitely.
Yeah. Anyhow, so yeah,
So
you were saying
So yeah, so Gabor Erdei became the sound designer on the project, and that's how I found him. And I was, and when I saw that when I went to his IMDb and I realized that I have just locked a sound designer who happens to be Bella Tar's sound designer. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe my luck.
hmm
Yeah.
wow. So anyhow, Ishan, you have the stills up? And
Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry,
So I
I've
mean,
got
no worries.
some there. I tried ordering them, but
No, it's fine.
in case this one or two are off,
That's fine.
apologies.
Yeah, I
Just
mean,
give me one
I
second.
mean, I just wanted to kind of pull some stills up and just, show the people who are kind of tuning in because I think there's something
I think
very
that's a great idea. I can, I've never done this. I should take the opportunity to do this, because this is fantastic. I can talk about,
hmm
um, in film festival Q&As, there is never an opportunity to go back to the film shot by shot like this, and this
Yeah.
is great that.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, this was the terrace of our apartment. We had this one apartment where we lived, which was also our
Uh-huh.
office, which was also the place where the 2 stories were shot. We had
hmm
no
Oh wow.
money.
Okay.
Ship of
Yeah.
Theseus
No.
was made for like really impossible budget. Like the entire film was made for $200,000.
hmm
So
Wow.
we really had nothing, and we had to kind of make do with whatever we had. And this was that. So the apartment that we rented, which was Aida's house, and then we redid it a little bit to make it Soham's house.
hmm
So it's the same
Oh
apartment that you
wow.
see in both stories, just a little redone by Pooja.
Nice.
And this was the terrace of that apartment block.
Yeah.
And yeah, we went here, and I was I was imagining I was imagining a graphic shot, more like a more graphic
Yeah.
two-dimensional shot, with the wall being flat and these two people just appear, just their heads appearing from the other side.
hmm
So the graphic shot with just heads at the bottom,
hmm
Hmm.
and that was the shot I'd imagined. And Pankaj hated that idea when I put that frame. He's like, "You have no fucking idea
hmm
what this image can be. Let me show you." And then
Yeah.
he took this low angle, and I was like,
hmm
"Yeah, you're so right."
Yeah, I think I was gonna actually say because I think even in all the stills that we have, you'll kind of notice this. There's like this a very graphic sense of composition. It's very
Yeah,
clean
Yeah.
shapes, frames within frames. And I think the other thing that's very beautiful about this film, I think, is that a lot of scenes are kind of done in these longer takes, and you're just kind of with the characters, and it switches between these very graphic compositions is like kind of like segues between the scenes in a way, and then you have these scenes that kind of play out oftentimes handheld. Like one scene that really came to mind was when Soham's character is confronting that man, right? And that entire sequence plays out in one take. And I don't know
that's
the
right.
actual length of it, but it's quite long. It's
That's
almost
Yeah.
right.
maybe 10 minutes.
It's about 10 minutes. Yeah,
Yeah, and I mean it's you can't almost like just like kind of like that guy is unable to escape this uncomfortable reality that he's now forced into. The audience is
yeah.
also is kind of
Yeah.
Ishan and I have always kind of talked about this. There's this one cinematographer who's like a friend of mine, and he kind of always says, every time you make a cut, you're asking the audience to reinvest into the film and kind of re buy into that concept of reality that you've kind of placed them in. And
Yeah.
so And there's some reality to that. I think there's some truth to that, and I think that
and and
sequence.
and here's the thing: some people do that really well. Some filmmakers
Hmm.
are extremely, have an extreme uh, understanding of cadence
Yeah.
of uh, of shots.
Hmm.
And my expertise, or my I've always naturally gravitated towards this mise en scène kind of making films. I mean, my first short film right here, right now, is too long. Was two long shots of 15 minutes each across like a 1 mile neighborhood, 1 mile area
Hmm.
diameter neighborhood. So with like 20 characters going in and out, and like it goes into a car, it goes into like vehicles and moving vehicles and jumps on and off, and just like it's a heat stroke really of motion.
Hmm.
And that's how I've always looked at things. And I've been an amateur magician all my life, and uh, I I find it extremely effective when magic is performed without any kind of
Trickery.
visible,
Mm.
any kind of
Yeah,
any
yeah.
kind of any kind of suspicion.
Hmm.
You don't want to produce a piece of magic where you do something big, and the audience goes back home thinking, yeah, there must be something in there.
Hmm.
Yeah. How do they
Yeah,
pull that off?
surely there must be something in the light and the smoke, and there must be something in that hanging prop over there. There
Hmm.
must You don't want the audience to go back thinking that there was some technique that was invisible, but I can feel it. I can feel that there
Yeah.
was
I
craft there.
mean, it's
You want
basically.
the audience to feel with magic. You want to show your empty hands, and you want to create something right there. And I think mise en scène in cinema allows you to do that,
Hmm.
where you do not cut, and where you just stay on. It's like magic done with completely visible hands.
Yeah.
It's like that the audience does not suspect that you're playing a sleight of hand there.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Ishan, do you want
exactly.
to jump to the next shot? Um, but
Yeah,
just carrying on to kind of that idea that you just mentioned, I think it also has to do a lot with, like, suspension of disbelief, right? Every film kind of starts with a suspension of disbelief, and it's kind of, like you said, how
how long
much.
can you sustain it
Yeah,
almost?
and almost
Yeah.
make it feel without the audience kind of remembering that they're watching a movie, for example, or a film.
Yeah. Also, in my case, because my ideas are fantastical in a
Hmm.
way, for most
Mm.
audience members, my ideas are alien to I'm cognizant of the fact that the ideas that I'm presenting, the insights, the worldview, the frameworks that I'm presenting to my audiences are alien to a lot of them. Are are internal to everyone, but also
Mm.
consciously not something that they may have yet explored or articulated. And
Sure.
hence for me to use the tool of realism becomes even more urgent.
Hmm.
um, like if I were to present these ideas in a or these frameworks or these characters in a slightly hyper real world, in a slightly unbelievable world, in a slightly more designed world, I think it would make it even it would make it extremely difficult for audiences to
Mm.
to grasp the questions or the frameworks or the
Hmm.
experiences quoted in, because these characters are not everyday characters. None of the characters in Tumbad and Ship, even the documentaries we choose to make, even the non-fiction that I choose to produce, even those characters are not
Right.
everyday. They are not everyday people. These are people um, who lead very special journeys, who have very
Yeah.
special ways of looking at their lives and their
Hmm.
environment.
Hmm.
So it becomes even more urgent and essential for me to put them
Mm.
in real settings, in believable settings.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh, but
I think at least like with Ship, if despite that, they could be people that you might walk past, right?
Hmm.
And they could be people that you could interact with in some small way. So I think that also adds,
yeah,
um,
Hmm.
that this, sort of reinforces what you're saying, is that they're on these journeys, that we might not even know about, but it's so believable because
Hmm.
it
yeah,
could be, um, you know, someone
exactly.
Yeah,
we've
and I
we've
think it's
we've
also in the
met,
way you
walked past.
and it's also in the way you film it, right? It's like so many of those sequences kind of just take place kind of in, like, these like locations and areas that we're so familiar with. There is a very
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Which is, by the way, something that Pankaj and I kind of constantly discuss. See, Pooja is an architect, so Pooja brings in great architectural perspective to
Mm-hmm.
everything that we do. She kind of looks at a scene. She has this amazing knack of looking at a scene, looking at a story, and saying, you know what, let's go to this part in the country and let's check out this building. Like she's a
Mm-hmm.
vocabulary, she's a
Mm.
dictionary of architecture, and that's
Wow.
everything that you've seen till now that we've done. It's somewhere come from that
Mm.
vision of Pooja's vision of saying, you know what, this monk story, there is Anand, you're not going to find a monastery that really represents this worldview. You may want to look at an art gallery. I'm like, and I was like, and Pankaj and I were like, an art gallery is never going to look like a monastery. What are you talking about? And she's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
make this trip. And this is a time when we didn't have money, have the budgets to make trips for Reggis.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
taking
Right.
the big risk of going to
Ishan, I
Rajasthan
think we have a
and checking out
still,
this.
I
right?
have. Yeah. I do. I do. I mean, it's later.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
mean,
that's
it's
fine. Yeah,
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
yeah, that's the one. That's the one. So
Yeah.
that's
I mean,
where,
this was. I think this was one. I think if not the most, but definitely one of the most like striking bits or like
Yeah.
sort of sequences, because I think, I mean, it really just the insight into her background really makes so much sense now, right? Because you see it throughout, I think,
Mm-hmm.
just in the way these shapes and the places that the characters are in.
Yeah.
and this was of course the late great Charles Correa's
Mm.
Avar Kendra
Mm-hmm.
in Rajasthan, and this was Pooja's idea. This was
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. I'm so glad that I followed her lead on this one,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and I'm just so grateful to her to have kind of pointed us in this direction because
Yeah.
she was so sure. I was neutral. Pankaj was completely unsure about it at first. Um, and then when we got there, I think all of us became
Mm-hmm.
increasingly certain that this absolutely
This was,
represents
yeah.
the spirit
Yeah.
of
I
this
think
character.
Ishan, can we just quickly go back? I think let's just go through these frames really quickly, and then I think we should jump into
Yeah.
Tumbbad because I think we haven't gotten to Tumbbad yet at all. So,
Yeah,
no,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think some of these, these
yeah.
sequences, you have these.
Because Pankaj knew of the space, and Pankaj can
Mm-hmm.
decided that if there is a long road journey,
Mm-hmm.
um, this this would be a great place to.
Yeah.
But here's what I learned when we got here, that this was the sound that I was looking for. So when Gabor and I were sitting on the sound design, from this point onwards in the film, you hear the windmill till the end of the monk story.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. But yeah, I think also with this you have that kind of like I think what really drew me to this frame and then the next frame as well, which we can go to, is the idea of like the group like composition, right? You have this group together, and also I mean now that I'm seeing it again, I'm just like you have the ceiling in the background, which kind of exactly goes into that third story, where they start by driving
Yeah,
on that ceiling and
yeah, yeah,
they reference
yeah,
it. But I just think like as for me at least as a cinematographer myself, what always kind of draws me in is beautiful group compositions, right? When you have multiple characters framed up in a
yeah.
situation in an interesting way. Anand, I think you somehow got
Yeah, I don't know
flipped
how that happened.
upside down.
So strange. I don't know. I don't know how to bring it back now.
Are you on a phone? Maybe it's the
No, I'm on a. Okay, I don't know what to do anymore. And this is so funny.
I don't know what happened all of a sudden. Let's see.
Should I stop sharing and then we can?
No, I don't think it's that. I think it happened once
I don't know
before in
how this
between.
happened. Okay, I can at least do this perhaps.
Okay, cool.
Okay, this makes more sense. How did it just flip around like that?
Okay, awesome.
That's hilarious. No, wait, I'll have to hold this somehow.
Um, um,
It just happened on its own like that.
do you want to
And
quickly maybe there's oh, you're
oh,
back. Oh,
it
great.
fixed itself. What
Okay,
happened? How?
I'm glad.
What?
I'm
Okay,
really
great.
glad. Okay, cool.
What's going on?
Let's just
This is
okay.
hilarious.
Let's hope it relaxes. Maybe. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, we can
So I
just
don't know
keep.
what I can't since I'm sharing the screen. I have
This
no
is
idea what you guys are talking about.
Oh,
this is
his
yeah.
he's upside down. Okay, Ishan, I think we can just go to the next frame.
Okay, cool.
Well, we talked
So these
about
are
this.
yeah.
Yeah, the
Um,
gallery, and
and
you
so
know,
obviously inside.
yeah, even this, like, just the light and everything, just fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
I was slightly worried in this scene if the light is going to be too conscious.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, it's just so clearly, uh, like especially in this leading up, not exactly the scene, but this leading up towards the scene where he's on the bed in the same
Mm-hmm.
shot in the same space over here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the place because there is some smoke in there as well, and I was becoming a little concerned if it's too well painted,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm,
and but I'm again retrospectively absolutely glad that we
Yeah.
went ahead with that.
Yeah.
Absolute
Mm-hmm.
um, assertive light in a way. It's
Mm-hmm.
very assertive,
Tone.
and even though it's conscious, the image is very conscious, and we try to remove this level of awareness and insist like this persistent awareness of the
Mm-hmm.
cinematographer uh, as we matured, Pankaj and I, and I think even in Tumbbad, even though there are images that look just like this, somehow I like those images more sometimes because
Mm-hmm.
I think they
There's a certain
they are
finesse to them, I would say.
they're, they're they're lesser conscious
Mm-hmm.
from time to
mm.
time. They
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think we can go to the
but
next.
this I mean this now that I'm revisiting
Mm-hmm.
this for a little while this didn't work for me. Now that I'm revisiting this after all these years, it's working again, I guess.
I think that's also just, yeah, with time, perspective changes, I guess. Especially with older work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Should I go to the next?
yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Even, like, I mean, it's just constantly coming back to these, like, these moments and these, graphic compositions. I
Yeah.
think even, the
Yeah.
ideal, even abroad,
This
I
was
guess.
pilgrimage. This this space was just pilgrimage for us. We this is the island where Ingmar Bergman lived for 40 years of his life and made most of his films at.
Wow.
Ah, amazing.
So this is the island that you'd see in
Yeah,
most Ingmar Bergman films.
right,
Mm.
right. Yeah. So
It's Faroe Island.
yeah, even, I mean, yeah, see, like, even here you have that same sense of, I mean, those I mean, some of the images from this film are extremely striking, and they just stay with you, I think. This one as well. Um,
Yeah.
is there any more, Ishan,
I
or
think
is that
I think that's it.
okay?
I
And
think that's
then
it.
next we have Tumbbad, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can start that discussion.
Yeah, cool. Sounds good. So yeah, I mean, so with Tumbbad, I think the first question I kind of had was, like, when I saw the credits, there's a director, there's a co-director, there's a creative director, right? And I was like trying to kind of, I mean, I don't
Hmm.
even know. I mean, you're gonna have to explain that to me. Like, what were the kind of, how did you guys separate the tasks? Like, who was doing what, and kind of how did this whole project kind of come to be, maybe?
Um, it Tumbad is really a film of multiple authors. Like
Okay.
if there is one thing that can be said about that film is that it really had multiple authors and really was a project of great synthesis. Um,
Mm.
I won't call it a great collaboration because even though it was a collaborative synthesis, we weren't collaborative towards each other.
Mm-hmm.
It was like all of us had authorship and we wanted to pull the project in certain take the project in certain direction, take the cinema in certain direction, and we were stretching it, we're stretching its limits, we're stretching what's possible in a collaboration really, and
Mm-hmm.
that stretch
Okay.
our limits as well emotionally and for a lack of better word spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
um, so Tumbat started as a story that Rahi wrote course. It's a story that he adapted from a short story. That's how where it started. By the time we got around to making it, it had nothing to do with the original short story.
Mhm.
But the idea of a husk, the idea of this creature living in the underbelly of this decrepit old ruin. That's where that idea, the germ came from a short story, and then Rahi built a version on it,
Mhm.
and I came on board as a producer and a writer. At that time, Ship of Theseus had done really well, and I had the opportunity to put together something. Soham again had made some money in his other businesses that he was willing to invest again, and because of the success that Ship of Theseus had seen globally, Svenska Institute and others were willing to participate in the next film that I would be producing. So this is the film I chose to produce because of all the things that I was looking at. This really resonated with me. I thought that the world was very exciting for me to participate in. I had so many ideas about that world.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and and post Ship of Thesis, I was dying to do something that was high design. Pooja and I were both very keen on doing something that was playful with design with that allowed us to play a little more, breathe a little more, and leave a little more room
Yeah, absolutely.
with design. Which in a super realistic film like Ship of Theseus, you cannot do beyond a point. So
And I think that
Pankaj,
comes through. Yeah.
we all of us were very keen on trying to do something that had all of that, and Rahi had that world. Rahi had created an idea, a story, a roadmap for that world.
Yeah.
So that's when we got involved, and I decided to produce the film and write the film because Rahi didn't have I mean, Rahi had a working script, but that wasn't a producible film.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
so I rewrote the script with Rahi, and then Mitesh, who was my old associate, got involved, and my assistant got involved. Adesh, who was my assistant, got involved. Adesh, by the way, is not the co-director of the film. I must put this on record, and it's a wrongly credited. Uh, he's the only singularly wrongly credited person in the entire credit roll that you would see on Tumbbad, and that was done because of really bad fallout between people, and he basically saw the film only through its post production. He never directed a single scene. He never co-directed a single scene or a single moment in the entire
Oh.
film. So it's unfortunate that he's being called the co-director because he had nothing to do with directing a single moment in the entire film. But Rahi, of course, did. Rahi built the world with me, and then Rahi and I were building this world together. Pankaj, of course, brought in immense vision. So there are just so many authors. But if anything, the authors of the film would be Pankaj, Rahi, me, Pooja, and
Mhm.
Nitin. These are the five people I would credit as the authors of that world.
Right.
Um,
But like, so but as a creative director, so most of what you did was the writing and kind of
No,
designing
no,
the
I
world.
directed. I directed as well. I
Okay.
directed scenes, actors,
Okay.
large number of scenes, in fact, that you see in the film. I was hands on.
Okay.
Uh, so Rahi and I were on the set together every day.
Okay.
We
Okay.
were being hands on. The film was shot twice. The first version was shot when Rahi shot it by himself,
Mhm.
where I was just producing, and
Hmm.
there my role in the first version it was only to write and produce.
Okay.
But after reviewing the material, we decided to remake the film.
Okay.
And when we remade the film, I was hands-on
Got it.
as a creative director, and
Got it.
that's when the responsibilities got a little murky and
Mm.
uncertain, where
Right.
I had to uh, where I had to be there, where I had to be hands-on
Mhm.
to help shape this vision that we all of us always had about the film,
Mhm.
and help shape that vision more precisely.
Mhm.
So, so yeah, I mean, this is the first time on record I'm saying any of this, by the way. But it was a very painful process. Tumbbad was extremely painful for everyone involved. I mean, we did not speak to, none of us spoke to each other for years after finishing Tumbbad. So Pankaj and Rahi and I and Mitesh and um, all of us kind of really had a very long silence post
Mm.
the film
Yeah.
with each other. And only recently, only in the last 1 or 2 years, we started
Mm-hmm.
talking to each other again, and we started becoming warm to
Back.
each other again.
Yeah.
And and each one, I really feel it's such a unique thing that happened in our lives, and I don't know if that can happen again, because I know what Rahi brings on board, and I know how
Mm.
valuable that is.
Mm-hmm.
I know what Pankaj brings on board, and I know how valuable that is to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was really amazing that I found a way to synergize these extremely diverse people into one flash of meaning that
Mm-hmm.
became Tumbbad.
Right.
Um, it's but again, people are all of us were extremely diverse, and at that time, it was just the time of our lives. I think
Mm.
I don't know why it happened, and why we were so um,
I
why we
think,
caused so much inconvenience and discomfort to each other while making that film. Now
but
I
I
look
think
back at it, and
like
I
filmmaking
do
does
not
that to
look
an
back
extent,
at that
right?
time with a lot of pride. In fact, I look back at that
Mm.
time with a lot of pain and guilt, to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
because I think while we were delivering our best to each other, while we
Yeah.
were giving our best to each other, we were not very kind to each other.
Interesting. But I think filmmaking, I think, to an extent, it's, I mean, I'm sure you've heard of like some people like, compare it to like, it's like, it's like going to war, right? And you have to like kind of be in it
Yeah,
together. You're this troop, and you're in it. It takes a lot out of everyone, I think, to an extent, right?
it's
And
extremely painful. I mean,
mm,
it's a disease. I do not know why I allow myself to fall into it. Like when I'm out, I'm making a film right now, and that's when I start recalling how painful it is. Like
mhm,
I
Mm.
most of you know I've hit the jackpot with wellness. You know, I've been extremely fortunate with wellness, and
mhm,
I have mental well-being. I'm largely sane and rational with my ideas and my thoughts and my aspirations and my relationships. I'm largely all right. It's only during making a film that everything just starts like falling apart. It's and I just don't. I mean, it's really a self-invited sickness, um, and the reason you do it is because that's a way of passing. That's a way of really transmitting
Yeah.
yourself
mhm,
into this thing that will live on, that will uh, transcend your existence,
yeah,
and that a part of yourself will be coded into. So
mhm,
it's literally in a way as rich an experience as as giving birth to something is, and it's a I know it's an overabused metaphor, but I don't know if it's understood in its entirety by all of us when we use it. I
I mean,
understand
I
it every
think, I
time I
mean,
get
just
into it.
just to I mean, like build on that. I think it. I mean, I would definitely tend to agree, because I think it's something that people know, like rationally, logically, but it's sort of you forget about
mhm,
all the like blood, sweat, and tears, maybe, that goes into that process, because I think it's something that, I mean, almost like every time you're done, there's sort of that, you know I guess a positive feeling, right, that you've sort of accomplished this thing, and then you forget almost, right? It's sort of that like momentary, if not longer, sort of amnesia, that you forget, you sort of like gloss over all of those
Pain.
uphill battles, yeah, and all that pain, because I know, even personally, like when you're like if you're writing a story, like I think every time you start something new, it's so much there's so much of that like inertia that you have to push, and resistance that you have to
mhm,
get over, to once you sort of start moving. And I think that, I mean, that's something that, particularly
Yeah.
in filmmaking, seems so heightened, because it's not just you, right? Like I think in with writing, it's just you deal with yourself in some cases, unless you've got co-writers. But like when you're making a film, there's so many different variables involved,
Yeah.
right? And particularly I think when what you were mentioning about the different authors on the project, and I think that even with best intentions, like you're mentioning, it can still cause pain to one
Yeah,
another.
I mean everyone is so invested, right? It's not
Absolutely.
it's like a film doesn't come together in like some it's so funny like some people are like, oh, how long did you shoot this film in, or how long did you shoot this project in, and you'll say,
Right.
20 shooting days or 30 shooting days or 50 shooting days, whatever it is, and they're
Mhm.
like, oh, that's it, but they don't realize it's 2 years or 3 years or sometimes even
Absolutely.
5 years,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
and so it is a thing. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, I think Tumbbad as a film is quite successful in what it's trying to say. And I mean, I really loved it. I'd actually mentioned to Ishan, I mean, not like
Yeah.
that it reminds me of a film or anything, but it reminded me a little in the sense of like kind of how it treats the story that it's trying to tell. It reminded me of a film that we'd seen for the cinema club from Korea called Wailing. I don't know if you've seen it. Wailing.
Wailing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
the Wailing.
The
Yeah.
Wailing,
The
maybe.
wailing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
A beautiful film, but it's also like, I mean, it's kind of similar in the sense that it's tackling this village setting, and it approaches it and explores it through the genre of, I guess, horror, right? And it has
Ah,
this
okay.
kind of
Yeah. But
supernatural.
it's got that like folk mythology
Exactly.
kind of like
Uh-huh.
Layer to it.
blend as well. And I think that it
Hmm.
yeah, I mean it definitely
And
I mean, whether unintentionally, it definitely like recalls that like atmosphere, I think.
mhm. And I
Because
just, yeah.
as an audience, you're trying, like you sort of have this like setup that you present us with, and then we're sort of still like trying to find out what's happening, at every step. Like, it seems, like we seem to know I think in each story or each chapter, rather, like you think what's going on, like what is happening, and you're like, okay, I think I've got a sense of it. But then with each new chapter, you're like, oh, like this is what's real. And then I think in the final
It
chapter, it's
deepens.
sort of yeah continuously. So I mean that's
um
something that was really um just
Yeah.
keeps you on
Hooked.
through the thing.
And I think like the central question
The-
as well, I mean, of greed, that I mean,
Yeah.
you start with that quote as well, right? And I think you go into the film from there. So
there's a film that I saw a lot while making Tumbbad, and I saw it a few times. And if there were a cinematic influence, if there was something that influenced me deeply cinematically at that time, it was this one film. It's Alexei German's Hard to Be God.
okay.
Um, it's an absolutely stunning piece of cinema. It's just so I just meditated on that film a lot, and
Hmm.
uh, the setting of Tumbbad was very different from Hard to Be God,
Hmm.
and the story and the screenplay and everything is so very very different from Hard to Be God, but just the physical tactile
Nature of it.
experience, the textures and
Right.
the just the way
Hmm.
light is to speak with characters, and just the way people are going to move about in their environment. I think just those very tactile, textured, visceral
Hmm.
Right.
uh,
Speaking to that, Ishan,
inspirations.
do you have the stills up?
Yeah.
Maybe we
Yeah.
can,
Yeah.
yeah. Speaking to the
Yeah.
the
One
tactile
one of them is
nature,
like a little
lower
over
resolution.
pixelated for some
Oh,
reason, but
okay.
but
But yeah, we can
so
just kind of jump into that a little bit. But yeah, no, I agree. I think also what I think as the beautiful thing that I don't know how much you guys created, how much you guys had to work with, but with Tumbbad, I think the idea of the environment, the constant rain, Did you shoot during the monsoon season? Is that how you got that, or is that something you guys, artificially
No, there was a
created?
lot of artificial rain.
Okay.
We did shoot during the monsoons as well.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of exterior locations were shot during the monsoons, but
Okay.
we also had a huge amount of artificial rain.
Yeah, because I feel like you constantly feel that, I feel like whenever you're outside, you feel this blue, like, these blue skies, exactly like this image. And then I think it's like, whenever you go indoors, you kind of
This
feel a
this
certain
this is
warmth.
again this was again a space that both Rahi and Pankaj were obsessed with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this was really to their credit that we were able to capture something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, like they were both very very insistent on shooting in monsoons, and we
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
the 4 years that we spent making Tumbbad were years spent chasing clouds and monsoons.
Yeah. And I think you feel that, right? There's like this, the exteriors have this certain gloomy nature to it, and then all the interiors have this certain warmth to it. And I think you explore that with the color palettes of the film itself.
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
and so, Ishan, if you want to just jump to the next still
Yep.
really quickly, and I even here, and I think, I mean, now, it's like in the beginning of the film, maybe you don't realize this, but then you get to the end of it, and then you look at this still again, you see the two brothers, you see the mother, and she's wearing this beautiful red sari, which is gonna kind of go back to that idea of the womb later on, and that's red, and
Yeah.
I mean, just the usage of color, and so I'm guessing this was all. Did you say it's puja, right? You said no.
Well, this set was built by Nitin.
Okay.
Nitin sketched the set and he built exactly what he had sketched. It was really
Okay.
beautiful to see from
Right.
him.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And then but no, but just the idea of the usage of color and everything, like, I mean, kind of just, did that come from, like working with Pankaj or like someone specific, or just kind of.
Well, again, this color, this red. Again, of course, it's
Mhm.
historically correct. Uh, in
Okay.
this part of Maharashtra, a woman of this caste would wear, a widow would wear this color
Okay.
Mm.
uh, as a sign of widowhood. So what would be white in other parts of the country
Ah,
would be
Would be yeah.
maroon, red here.
wow.
So this was historically accurate as well,
Interesting.
and this is like as old as and this is one idea that has stayed in the story right from the very onset of Rahi's world. So there are a few things that were inherited
Mm-hmm.
from Rahi's original world, and this is definitely one of those things. This entire
Yeah.
setting about the kids, the way they look, the mother,
Mm.
and the and what she wears, etc. These are
Beautiful.
ideas from the original world that Rahi had created
Yeah.
that stayed in the film
Hmm.
till multiple renditions happened.
Right. I mean, we can move to the next still, but I mean, we'll just keep speaking. So working with Pankaj and Rahi and all these other people, like, I mean, your process, I guess. So were a lot of the scenes storyboarded, or is it something that you discover kind of like, these are the scenes and this is what's gonna work? How do you, like, what's your process like with that?
Well, like I mentioned, a lot of we had the opportunity to go back and reshoot a lot of scenes.
Right.
So
Mm.
what Rahi and Pankaj had done in the first version became a kind of a
Like a
mood
benchmark.
board to
Mm.
build the next version on. So
Hmm.
what you see is a synthesis of the first and the second version
Got it.
final film.
Okay.
So this moment, of course, we had a mood idea already. This location had been shot in, and
Right.
then when I went there, I this is a decision that I started taking of looking at this film in a new from a new direction,
Hmm.
and this was the idea of involving Raghav in Vinayak's story, and the idea of having Raghav kind of follow Vinayak to a certain extent in a certain way,
Right.
and be able to kind of see it from Raghav's vantage point also. So these were the decisions that added the magnification and lensing ideas later,
Hmm.
but the mood had already been created once, so we were
Right.
building upon something that was already very
Right.
rich.
Yeah. Do we have another? We have more stills, right, Ishan?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Sorry.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So this
just,
is this
yeah. Go ahead.
here here Nitin and I kind of Nitin got stuck with me because I insisted on getting the plants right,
Right.
and that was really the cause of pain on these days of shoot
Mm-hmm.
was just the plants,
Mm-hmm.
and
Filling up
and
that
and
room.
and just filling up the space and making the
Mm.
plants look like they've grown there, and that really becomes a singular challenge when you have to do something like that
Right.
on a set. There's really a set in Bombay that we
Oh,
created,
okay.
Oh, wow, okay.
and it was
Yeah.
the womb. Of course, I mean, the womb again. We had so many ideas
Hmm.
that we tried to execute, but they were just way too ambitious for the budgets we had.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, So the womb was designed to breathe more. Doesn't
Okay.
probably do as much, but the womb was designed to constantly breathe. Also, Zayn and team would pour uh, liters and liters of this sticky fluid. I don't
Hmm.
know what they used to call it. Zayn would remember, and they would just like for every shot we would just fill up the space
Mm-hmm.
with
So it would like
like
drip or
endless
something.
buckets poured onto the sides of the walls and
Right.
to kind of make
Wow.
it glisten.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think like one question particularly about this, sequence, or just generally that Neeraj and I had earlier is how do you like, because I mean, there's so much of the success I think also in a film like this is showing less. I guess almost right is that
Yeah.
you sort of you leave a lot to the audience's imagination, but also it sort of contributes to that level of suspense or need to investigate, and that element of curiosity that we were talking about early on. So how did
Mm-hmm.
you all sort of like what was that process of saying that okay maybe we would love to show this, like show more like you were mentioning, but let's whether it's budget constraints or also like also from the storytelling point of view, how do you decide we need to lean in here more or we need to like hold back?
Well, some ideas just present themselves in the in just the desire to keep the metaphor accurate and the
Mm.
metaphor consistent. Like for example, the idea of life moving through this roots, these trees that like the grandmother literally becomes this tree
Yeah, the tree,
in
that
the
was
whole
that was a
house.
lovely sequence.
Yeah, and similarly, the idea that the veins of the womb are probably old roots and stems,
Mm-hmm.
and um, just these metaphorical consistencies that we want to keep on, that we want to kind of keep having different parts interact with each other and talk to each other, speak to each other. Just that desire kind of gives you a very good constraint to work within, a very good
Mm.
boundary to work within. Otherwise, everything is endless. Um, so
Yeah.
the first boundary is metaphorical consistency, is allegorical consistency in the image making, and of course that along with real resources that
Yeah.
there is always the. I mean, I called Shekhar Kapoor the day before yesterday morning, and I was crying about not having sufficient budgets for my film right now. And Shekhar is like, Anand, my previous AD is now the producer on Star Wars, and he called me the other day and he said, Shekhar, we just have no money. Uh, our budget was 250 million, and now it's 170 million. How are we ever going to make this film? So,
Right.
so it's like no matter what,
No matter, yeah, yeah.
no matter where you are going to be in life, you're always going to say this. You're always going to call
Yeah,
me and say, we don't have enough budgets, and you're gonna do well. You're gonna make something out of it. So that's really the story of this. I mean,
great.
there are resource constraints, there are space constraints, and there are allegorical consistencies, there are
Yeah.
narrative consistencies, there is a narrative desire, there is a narrative movement, there is a character arc, like just the beautiful mix of these elements come together, and they force you in a place, and it can be your cage and it can be your chrysalis,
Mm-hmm.
and And often we've been fortunate that it turned out to be a chrysalis. It turned out to be
Mm-hmm.
the cocoon that instead of binding us,
Set you
grew
free.
us
Yeah.
possibilities. Yeah. So that was the case with this as well. I mean, the womb. When Nitin first showed me, it was a mad idea. Nobody thought we were going to be able to pull this off really for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
When Nitin showed me the first patch of womb, Pankaj freaked out. I remember Pankaj said, how am I ever going to make it look anything half
Mm.
interesting? Like, this is going to look like shit on screen. And I said, I and I kept on insisting that we don't give up on it, and we took a month and then another and then another, and then we had something that started resembling like what all of us had in
Mm-hmm.
mind,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and yeah,
Absolutely.
and then we finally had this.
Yeah. Let's maybe just go to the next still really quickly. Um, yeah. Even I mean,
Yeah,
just from
This
a
is the
visual
second last.
standpoint, yeah. I mean, just a visual standpoint, I think the frames are very striking. I think, and I think it's something that you kind of see that carried from Ship of Theseus. There are these very graphic compositions, especially with your wide shots.
yeah.
And we've kind of seen that in some of these stills as well. And Ishan, you said there's one more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was again the previous one was again an insistence on using the flower, just like
Mm-hmm.
going all in
Mm-hmm.
with that
Yeah.
commitment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The idea that I thought a lot about the idea that we have given to this metaphor,
Mm-hmm.
and again it was a metaphor that I inherited um, from Rahi's original first shots. Like the first draft that Rahi had, there was a use of flower, but then it wasn't persistent. It wasn't throughout
Mm-hmm.
the script,
Yeah.
and I started feeling that we have to fully commit to it. We have to
Make it a
fully commit
motif that
to
keeps coming back.
we have to make it about the material, because
Yeah.
that's what increasingly the film that we were making was becoming about. It
You,
was about it was about cargo.
mm-hmm.
When the British landed in most of the early colonies, they they would always come in these ships and carry a lot of cargo. So
Mm.
so all material wealth for the longest time in places like Papua New Guinea, etc., what is just called cargo,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really something that I wish to underline here, the idea of cargo, and that's something that you see throughout the film.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
The idea of material wealth
Mm-hmm.
over and over again.
Yeah, I think speaking of material wealth, an interesting point that I noticed, and I don't know if you did this intentionally or not, but for the most part, I think there's a few like places where I think it kind of toes the line. But I think what's very interesting is that a lot of the female characters and then the male characters and their view on greed and wealth and material, because
Yeah.
it starts with
Mm.
even the grandmother who at one point was collecting these coins tells her grandson, don't do this, you don't
Yes.
want to live
Yes.
this life. And
Don't
Yes.
follow my.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
Yes.
the
Absolutely.
mother, and then even his wife kind of like asks these questions and is curious, but she doesn't
And she says
say.
why. She says why. What for?
Yeah, and she
Yeah.
never
Exactly.
and she
What's the
never
point? Like,
and she never actually says, go get more. The only person who ever
yeah,
says go get more is the mistress.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I
I
mean,
yeah.
again, we were just like it was this playfulness that led
Mhm.
us in these
Mm.
places. I don't think there was a thought about gender there. I
Mhm.
don't think that the ideas were gendered in that way.
Mhm.
Uh, there is of course a comment on patriarchy
Yeah.
Yeah.
and the horror of patriarchy and the horror of aggressive, toxic patriarchy, and its relationship, its long-term relationship with conquest, with greed, with power,
Right.
with the idea of being called sarkar.
Mhm.
Mm.
As you see, there are three sarkars in the film. The first sarkar is the feudal landlord.
Right.
Yeah.
The second sarkar is British, is when the
Yeah.
British is addressed as sarkar, and the
Correct.
third time
And
it's
it's the.
Bharat sarkar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the idea of conquest, the idea of power, the idea of deeply, of course, that is deeply gendered.
Mhm.
That is a masculine idea in the film.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think it kind of like mirrors the story with and the the goddess, and like what
Yeah,
your
exactly.
prologue, I guess you could say.
That story was written along with making the film. Like
Mm-hmm.
while we were making the film, we knew that we need a deeper mythology to explain all of this. So
Mm-hmm.
that story was written while we were making
Mm-hmm.
where we decided. And also the time that we were making the film, Zain and Manoj were working on a parallel world graphic novel,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh wow. Okay.
so we never got around to kind of finishing that project, but a lot of ideas were coming from there as well,
Very
um,
Hmm.
cool.
from the graphic novel world.
I mean,
Interesting.
I think also just building on this, the thread that you, or sort of like the conceit that you set up in the beginning, right, as that like idea. I think what really struck me was that all of the characters, are sort of afraid of this curse, right, um, that they'll get if they, either if they touch, they get touched, or but I think what's actually interesting, or what seems obvious and intentional, is that the curse is in some sense the greed itself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so how do you,
Yeah,
like, because that's something that you so easily fall into that you don't
yeah,
even realize, right? It's one
yeah.
of those sort of internal curses almost. That's not like it's not like a cliched or stereotypical like curse that I will
Mm-hmm.
become a monster, or
Yeah.
then and I think that, I mean, that's something that is running throughout, but you also it's not, I think it's not like hammered on constantly and over your head, so it's not like overbearing in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
Yeah. Or we greed, of course, was the pivot around which the entire you
yeah,
know allegory is built upon. The idea of greed and the idea of and also what stays continuous for me across these stories is the idea of vestiges, the idea of uh, vestiges as sins or vestiges as curses, and
mm,
that's something that I speak about a lot in my nonfiction work. So
Mm-hmm.
and we'll take an entire conversation just to kind of address that. But the idea that we evolved in very specific environments of scarcity in forest and savanna environments, and um,
Mm-hmm.
and we have inherited vestiges of behaviors from that environment, which
mm,
for the longest time we started for the last 2000 years only we started recognizing them as things that we perhaps don't need, and we
Mm-hmm.
hence in
right,
our infantile stage of philosophical discourse and policy making, we call those vestiges sins,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and now we look at these vestiges as redundancies. We understand why
yeah,
greed or jealousy or hatred or anger were perhaps necessary when there were a few thousand of us living on a planet of great scarcity, not
yeah,
scarcity of resources, but scarcity in our ability in tools and our
mm,
tools of mining those resources. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and and those behaviors in an environment of abundance
yeah.
are perhaps redundant and even detrimental. So
Mm-hmm.
they are hence
Oh
curses.
yeah, I mean absolutely, with
Yeah.
just the way things are
Yeah.
going,
Exactly.
Yeah.
it seems very detrimental.
Um, Ishan, do we have
Yes,
any questions in our YouTube chat? Maybe we can
yeah,
do like one or two of them, and then
yeah,
I know we've been going on
yeah,
for a while, so and
yeah,
yeah.
for sure. So we have one that I think is goes back to just the idea of the scientific coding and like storytelling. Uh, from Vitika, it says, "Did existential theory ever affect your thought process, especially with the instance of the cave?" I'm assuming that's keeping Ship of Theseus in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Not really. No, I've never had I've never viscerally experienced a profound existential crisis, and the worldview of an entire um, generation of philosophers like Sartre or Nietzsche or Camus um, never deeply resonated with me as much as it did with some of my friends back in the day. And in my late teens and early 20s, I had
Mm-hmm.
friends would who gravitated very profoundly to to that worldview. But I was always I I'm I'm a bit of a romantic, and I've always gravitated towards hope. And while accepting the meaninglessness of the universe, that let's if we were to accept that life is not teleological, that there is no pre-designed, preconceived meaning before for life to exist or for this universe to exist, but the meaning has accumulated.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning accumulates because life has accumulated. We have
Yeah.
so many behaviors, we have so many ways of responding to the environment, and life has somehow managed to stay together for 3 billion years on this planet now, and in that meaning has accumulated, and meaning is has been invented.
Mm-hmm.
And now we
Right.
can further the invention of this meaning. And we can also ask why, which it's an important philosophical question to ask. Why do you want to further or to oppose and take arms against the sea of trouble, and by opposing end them,
Mm-hmm.
why suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune? One can ask that question. It's a fair question to ask, and that's really the existential question, right?
Right.
For me, that question kind of has resolved itself in its unknowability at the moment. I know that there are things at stake here that are far more urgent, that are knowable, that we have the possibility to work with within our lifetimes. So I chose to privilege those naturally. I chose to privilege the areas of inquiry that we can actually answer, that we
Right.
can find answers to, that science has already perhaps found answers to, and philosophy and law still have not caught up.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
There are lots of areas of work there, lots of areas of bettering the future of humanity, lots of areas of telling stories that will make our lives ever so slightly meaningful and better.
But I
Um,
mean, also in that, like, with the hope that maybe answering these questions, you sort of, build up in some way, whether it's now or, whether someone, experiences these questions through the films later on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully it's sort of that.
Absolutely, and absolutely, that's the idea. I mean, and not to say that the questions by themselves are not already very vast and deep. I mean, the questions we are asking, the questions that Ship and Tumbbad are both kind of witnessing, like the scene
Yeah.
with the mother that you mentioned, that the scene when Panturang is sitting with his mother and offering her the chocolate. I mean, the gold coin actually opens up to be a trick. It's a chocolate,
Yeah.
and she tastes it and she says, "Did your father give it to you?" And he says, "Yes." "Does he like it too?" And he says, he doesn't like anything anymore.
Mm.
And she and
Yeah.
she says, "Then why?"
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And uh, that is an existential question for sure. Like, what is all of this for? फिर ये हाई क्यों? Like Galib uh,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
inquires into it, and Kabir inquires into it, and why any of this? And I think at the same time, I'm didactic, and I'm, like I said, because I make this outing once in a few years. I want to also give the answers that I have,
Right.
and the
Yeah.
answers
Right.
are also self-contained, with all the answers about why, and why we need to kind of keep moving forward, and why we need to kind of keep building a society, a world that is increasingly non-predatory, increasingly offers equal opportunities for more and
Yeah.
more people and for more and more life. And that is what we can solve for now.
Yeah.
Why
Absolutely.
exist, and why do any of this at all? We can only figure out at a later stage, perhaps when we are closer
Right.
to biosync
Yeah. And I
singularity or
guess
something like
counterintuitively by doing, right,
Yeah.
in some senses as well, because that,
that.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's sort of the only way that you hope to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Were there any more questions, Ishan? I'm sure there were a few,
I
but
think there were a few, but they sort of generally we sort of like
touched upon
spoke
them.
about
Okay.
them. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
I'd love to see your work, guys. Where do I see it? Ishan, I'm assuming you make films. What do you,
No,
are
so
you a film student?
I work at G5A, and I do some writing and photography uh,
yeah.
on
Okay.
this side, but not as professionally as here.
Yeah.
Uh,
And Neeraj, you're a cinematographer. How do I find? Is Meet Jen? Is that you?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
I'm following you already.
Yeah. But we'll connect, and I'll definitely, send some of my stuff over to
Yeah.
you and all of
I
that.
follow you on Instagram already.
Oh, amazing. Great. Fantastic. Solid.
Lovely work, Neeraj. Oh my God, this is such good work.
Thanks. But no, Anand, just wanted to say thank you so much for, taking the time out to, like, jump on this call with us and
Yeah,
just give us all
yeah,
this
just and
insight.
just like spending this time just like going over all of this
Hmm.
in some detail.
Yeah, it's rare. It's
Thank you guys.
amazing.
Thanks for having me. And sorry, I got a little lost in Neeraj's work. I'll
No,
totally.
totally understandable. Totally understandable.
But no, thank you so much. This has been a great, like, it's been a great insight. I mean, we've seen that, like, I mean, I think a lot of people have seen Ship of Theseus, at least, because I mean, it's been around for some time, and I remember when it came
Yeah.
out, it made a lot of waves, obviously.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of nice to have actually revisited the film after many years, but also kind of now, getting your perspective, and also just, knowing what we know after so many years. I think you see it in a new light as well. So that was, like, honestly, yeah, thank you so much. This was
Thank you
really
guys.
fun.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's also been nice and refreshing because I think for the past like 20 weeks, mostly it's just been me and Neeraj. So
Yeah.
it's been great to have that
What
like
films did you
outside.
guys watch?
I,
What films have you been watching the last 20
I
weeks?
can send you the entire list if you'd like. It's 40 movies so far, 42
Send me
movies.
the
Yeah.
highlights.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, let's see. I think we did some of the lesser known films of Bong Joon-ho. Um,
Like
in
Memories of
Korea.
Murder or something
Yeah.
else?
Yeah.
Memory,
Memories of
yeah.
Murder, the host.
Um, my one of my
Yeah, yeah. Go on.
sorry, one of my personal favorites was the film we watched the last session, which was Marlena the Murderer by
In 4X. Yeah.
Mauli Surya. She's an Indonesian
Yeah.
filmmaker, and I just thought that was like a
It was a
standout film.
wonderful
It was
film.
a standout film to me. It
Yeah.
was one of my personal favorites. Which, like, it's like when you least expect it, and it just kind of blows you away. That
Mm-hmm.
one was great. I loved The Handmaiden. That was one of my other
Yeah.
favorite
Same.
films.
Yeah.
It was
And
wonderful.
and I mean, and
So
then
beautifully shot.
Kurosawa and
Sorry.
Ozu, and I mean, so many incredible films. Um,
I think also Train to Busan was
yeah.
another like unexpected one that like went into it knowing very little, but also I mean knowing generally what it was, but also just the way in which it unravels and sort of
Mm-hmm.
takes you on this journey was just really memorable.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
But
yeah,
yeah. So thank you to everyone who kind of tuned in, and I guess we'll see you in about, I think, 2 weeks. So we'll see you at the next
yeah.
session,
2 weeks
and
is the next.
yeah.
Oh, this was live. I didn't know this. Oh, this was live.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
How many people have tuned in right now?
I think it's been. I'm just checking. I think it's a mix of like right now, just because we just did a new timing. I think there's about 25 people.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's a lot that
Oh,
like watch it afterwards.
Yeah.
Um, but we used to do
cool.
it before this. We used to do it.
I didn't even know there was a live audience. I thought I'm talking to the two of you right now.
No, I think which is great. I mean, it's sort of what we've tried to kind of create. I know that both Neeraj and I are sort of with the live and like the technology bit are sort of resistant in some senses, just because it can seem forced. So we've been trying to create like a space that is, has that sense of comfort despite being, through a screen and all.
Mhm.
Wonderful.
I'm just gonna really quickly stop streaming.